Most seniors are told to watch their salt and blood sugar if they want to protect their kidneys. But what if the real danger is sitting in your morning coffee, your lunch sandwich, or the healthy smoothie you drink every day? Some everyday foods can quietly overload your kidneys, irritate their tiny filters, and slowly wear them down without causing pain. And by the time many people notice the warning signs, the damage may have already gone too far. Today I'll show you the 10 foods that may be silently hurting your kidneys, including a few that most seniors still think are good for them. Before we start, take a guess in the comments. What everyday food do you think is secretly hurting people's kidneys the most? Let's see who gets it right. We will do this in reverse order and start with number 10, which is high sodium foods. These are typically the packaged processed foods like soups, canned soups, frozen meals, TV dinners, and any sort of fast food. But it's not as simple as what you hear. For the most part, you hear sodium or salt being villainized. But it's not really the salt. It is the fact that you get all that salt without any potassium to balance it out. So when you get sodium in processed food and there is no potassium, the sodium becomes a burden. The kidneys have to work much harder. It increases kidney stress. It causes excessive sodium retention. It causes fluid retention, and with that, increased blood pressure. That increased blood pressure causes extra friction. You get microvascular kidney damage in all those microvessels and microtubules. But the important thing to understand here is this: don't buy into the blanket statement that salt is bad. The problem is not always salt by itself. The bigger issue is the high sodium load in processed foods, especially when the diet is low in potassium-rich whole foods. If you have high blood pressure, kidney disease, or heart problems, always follow your doctor's sodium guidance. For many people, the bigger issue is not a small amount of salt used on real food, but the heavy sodium load hidden in processed foods. However, you need the potassium with it. So either you get electrolytes from a balanced diet, or you use salt on real potassium-rich foods like leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables. Number 9 is coffee creamers. Typically, when you think about coffee creamer, it sounds like coffee plus cream. It makes the coffee a little bit milder. But coffee creamers don't have any cream. They are non-dairy. And what do they put there instead? They put a bunch of chemicals. They are typically very fake, almost like flavored syrups. Some of the things you find inside are titanium dioxide emulsifiers, artificial colors, and artificial flavors. Emulsifiers are things that blend fat with water. These have been found to cause leaky kidney membranes. They interfere with the structural integrity of the kidney tissue. As a result, you could end up with protein in the urine, especially if you use these things long term. Number 8 is alcohol. We know that alcohol in large amounts is not great, but alcohol causes dehydration, which places extra stress on the kidneys because they have less fluid to work with to filter things. It produces a toxic load on basically all tissues. It also results in something called uric acid. Uric acid forms little sharp crystals. They have glass-like spikes on them. They are very abrasive and they can damage tissue. The kidneys are the organs that need to filter out this uric acid. Uric acid can also form kidney stones. When I put alcohol as number 8 on the list, meaning there are a lot worse things I'm talking about pure alcohol, like distilled spirits in moderation. But it could get a whole lot worse if we combine alcohol with different things, like a lot of people do. If you have mixed drinks now, you're going to have sugar, which is fructose. We'll talk about that separately, because that's a really bad thing. Artificial sweeteners will also make it a lot worse. We'll talk about those separately too, along with artificial additives and other chemicals that you put in there. Number 7 is green smoothies. Here's a big surprise to most people, probably, because you think of green smoothies as the ultimate health food. That's something you do when you're on a health kick and you really want to treat yourself to something good. However, things like spinach, almonds, and beets, which a lot of people put into these smoothies, are very high in oxalates. If you do these green smoothies and load them up with spinach every day, you could get an oxalate overload. These oxalates can form crystals and kidney stones, but I know what you're thinking. A lot of people drink green smoothies and have very good results. So what it all comes down to is how your body handles oxalates. There are a lot of different factors. Oxalates are not necessarily bad, but a lot of people are talking about them because many people are reacting to them. Basically, if your body doesn't handle oxalates well, then they become a problem. First of all, you can break them down. There are specific bacteria. If you have a very strong and varied microbiome, you'll probably have something called Oxalobacter formigenes, which can actually break down oxalates for you. If you break them down, then you can't absorb them because they are not a problem in the gut. They are a problem in the bloodstream, where they end up forming stones and crystals and getting to the kidneys. Besides breaking them down, you can also bind to them. If you have oxalates, but you also have a lot of calcium and magnesium, those minerals can bind to the oxalates. If they abound, you also will not absorb them, and they won't cause any problems. Then there's something called citrate. If you do absorb oxalates, citrate can be a good thing, because citrate can bind to them and keep them from binding to calcium. If calcium binds to oxalates in the gut, that's a good thing, because then we can flush them out. But if they get into the bloodstream and calcium binds to them, they can form crystals and stones. Once they are in the blood, it's a bad thing. Citrate from lemon or citric acid would act as a decoy. It would keep the oxalates from binding with calcium, so you would have fewer stones that way. So there are basically 3 ways you can get rid of them. You can break them down, you can bind to them in the gut so they get flushed out, or you can eliminate them through the gut and also through the kidney. Once oxalates make it into the bloodstream, the kidneys have to filter them out. Now let's look at some of the factors that can affect your ability to handle oxalates and how likely they are to do damage. If you have low hydrochloric acid or low stomach acid, you're going to absorb less calcium and magnesium. You can't really utilize them without stomach acid. If you have a mineral deficiency, meaning there are not enough minerals in your diet, you also can't bind properly to the oxalates. If you have a weak microbiome and don't have a good diversity of bugs in your gut, then you probably don't have this oxalobacter that can break down the oxalates. If you have a leaky gut, then more of the oxalates can leak into the bloodstream, even if they may have bound to some of the minerals that becomes a larger complex. But if you have a leaky gut, they might still make it out. If you are dehydrated, there is going to be more stone formation. The oxalates will tend to crystallize more, and it's going to place a higher burden on the kidneys because it will be more difficult to flush them out. If you are constipated, then the food is going to sit longer in the gut, and the oxalates are going to sit longer in the gut, so you'll have a tendency to absorb more. So it's not just a matter of having oxalates in spinach. There are a whole bunch of different factors that determine how well you handle them. Number 6 is artificial sweeteners. These are a really bad idea for your kidneys. There are 3 in particular: aspartame, sucralose, and acesulfame potassium. These appear in thousands or even tens of thousands of different foods. Aspartame, for one, breaks down into methanol or wood alcohol, the stuff that makes you go blind. This in turn breaks down into formaldehyde, which we use to preserve things like biological specimens. It also breaks down into formic acid. Then we have sucralose, which alters the function of the tubules in the kidneys. So we have altered and impaired function in terms of filtration and reabsorption. The kidneys just can't do their job properly. Then we have acesulfame potassium, which accumulates in kidney tissue and causes mitochondrial damage and oxidative stress. These are very bad in many different ways. On top of that, some research has raised concerns that frequent long-term use of certain artificial sweeteners may affect kidney stress, oxidative stress, or how the kidneys function. The risk may be higher for people who already have kidney problems or consume them every day. Number 5 is processed meat. Very often we hear that protein is bad for the kidneys. That's not really true. It's not protein itself. Protein produces nitrogen waste. Protein is different from fat or carbohydrate in that it has nitrogen, and that becomes a waste product that the kidneys have to filter out. However, when we get protein from real meat, from natural beef, then it's not a problem. It could be a problem if you're doing what's called rabbit starvation. That means you have nothing else to eat but extremely lean protein, and you're eating 300 to 400 grams of protein with basically nothing else. Then there is so much nitrogenous waste and nothing else to balance it that it does become a burden on the kidneys. But other than that extreme example, protein and nitrogen do not damage the kidneys unless they are combined with other risk factors. So if you already have some kidney problems, if you are dehydrated, or if you have metabolic disease, then you are not able to handle protein as well. Under these circumstances, it could be a good idea to pull back a little bit on protein. But other than that, the kidneys need protein to heal. Protein becomes the tissue that heals. When we talk about processed meats, they add some additional factors that are very stressful for the kidneys, like phosphate preservatives, nitrates, nitrites, and advanced glycation end product complexes. These are all very abrasive for most kinds of tissues. So all in all, these processed meats, chemicals, and fake things increase the acid load. They increase calcification and scarring on the kidneys. Number 4 is phosphate-laden foods. Phosphate is not a bad thing. But in processed foods, especially things like processed cheese, those fake nasty cheese slices that they put on hamburgers, sodas, frozen meals, TV dinners and fast food, they use a lot of phosphate preservatives. Again, phosphate is not a bad thing. Calcium and phosphate are the minerals that make up most of your bones. However, too much is not a good thing, and being out of balance is not a good thing. The inorganic phosphates we're talking about, the preservatives and food additives, are unnatural. They get absorbed at about 90%, whereas naturally occurring phosphates in natural food only get absorbed at about 30 to 40%. Humans have been around for a while. We have evolved and other animals function much the same way. We have developed a balance. We have developed an ability to absorb only a certain amount, and there is probably a reason for that. We have developed a balance with nature, if you will, but then when we go in and change it, we have artificial compounds and inorganic phosphates. Now, they don't act the same. There's a reason we would only absorb 30 to 40%. When we have something that we absorb way more of now, it becomes a burden. All these extra phosphates create problems because they accumulate in the kidney artery and bone. In bones, they are appropriate to a point until they disrupt the balance with calcium. They are supposed to be in a certain ratio, but phosphates are not supposed to accumulate in the kidneys and arteries. Those are soft tissues. What happens in the kidneys is something called renal osteodystrophy. Renal means kidney, osteo means bone, dystrophy means it's growing the wrong way. Over time, too much added phosphate can disturb the balance between calcium and phosphorus, especially in people with kidney problems. This can contribute to mineral imbalance bone problems and calcification in soft tissues. Number 3 is NSAIDs, over-the-counter drugs and painkillers. NSAIDs stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. It's not really a food, I know, but I had to have it on this list because so many people use them and you need to understand something about them. These are things like ibuprofen and naproxen, and there are a bunch of other related ones on the market. What they do is block a chemical messenger called a prostaglandin. In doing that, they also block and reduce blood flow to the kidney. That's something we need to understand about the kidneys. Per unit of tissue, they get the most blood flow of any organ in the body. They make up about 1% of the body weight, and they get about 20% of all the cardiac output, meaning all the blood that the heart pumps out. The kidneys need all that blood and all that oxygen to perform their work. They are extremely hard-working, but if we cut back on the blood flow now, they have to do the same workload. We don't have fewer toxins or fewer waste products in the body just because we reduce blood flow. Now the kidneys have to do the same work with less oxygen, so we are placing huge stress on the kidneys. The tissues get very stressed. We increase the concentration of toxins because the kidneys can't keep up. The end result is tissue damage and cell death in the kidneys. If this is more than occasional use, then we can get permanent loss of tissue. We can get permanent loss of filtering capacity. Number 2 is seed oils. This is basically anything sold in the store, anything mass-produced and sold as vegetable oil. It could be corn oil, canola oil, or soybean oil. The reason they are bad for you is not that the food they are made from is all that horrible. It may not be the best, but it's not really a bad food when it's growing. The problem is how they process it. The processing is very, very harsh. It's like an industrial product. In the processing, they use very high heat, very high pressure, and even solvents like acetone to get the last bit of oil out of these seeds, grains, or beans. The end result is that you oxidize these lipids and lipid byproducts. You get something in the final product called aldehydes. These aldehydes are not supposed to be in food. They are directly toxic to kidney cells. They damage the glomeruli, which is the smallest functional unit of the kidney. They scar the tubules. Over time, the more we eat these, they can degrade the filtration membranes as well. Overall, they do tremendous damage to the kidneys. The number one worst food for the kidneys is sugar, any of its derivatives, and any product that it gets into. We're talking about drinks, sweetened drinks, candy, sweet coffee drinks, cookies, cakes, desserts, and so on. It's not just white table sugar, which we call sucrose. It is also high fructose corn syrup. Even things like agave, which is sometimes proclaimed as a health food because it has a lower glycemic index, can be a problem. The fructose is the worst part in sugar, and agave sometimes has up to 80% fructose. So agave is like an extremely high fructose corn syrup, except it may not be made from corn, but it is very high in fructose. Even things like honey are also very high in fructose. When it comes to these, it's about quantity. If you're metabolically healthy and you use a teaspoon of honey, it's not going to kill your kidneys. But if you consume these things to the point where they are disrupting your metabolic health and your ability to process energy, then any of them can be a huge problem. A lot of people think sugar is bad just because it raises blood sugar, messes with your metabolism, affects your blood sugar, and causes insulin resistance. But the worst part about sugar is actually fructose. Regular sucrose or table sugar has 50% fructose and 50% glucose. But some of these other sweeteners can have even more fructose. Fructose goes straight to the liver. Glucose and most types of energy can be processed by almost every cell in the body. But fructose can only be processed by the liver. When the liver handles fructose, it uses up a lot of ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. ATP is our energy currency. Fructose causes a breakdown of ATP. Adenosine, which is the backbone in adenosine triphosphate, contains nitrogen. This nitrogen turns into uric acid. A lot of problems for the kidneys come from uric acid because it is a crystal. It is very harsh, sharp, and abrasive. Most people don't think about this because they associate uric acid with proteins. Sugar doesn't contain any protein. But because fructose breaks down ATP and ATP has adenosine with nitrogen sugar, especially fructose is one of the quickest and most significant ways that we produce and raise uric acid. This uric acid gets to the kidneys and has to be cleared through the kidneys. Like I said, it is very abrasive. It can cause stones, it can cause gout in joints, and it causes most of the kidney damage that leads to scarring and permanent damage. If you found this helpful, Health Tip 60 has another video that can help you understand the warning signs your kidneys may be giving you. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.